Here's where I look at it, right? First off, the experiment to me is the experiment of self-governance, right? So in order to self-govern, you got to have at least certain level of understanding, maturity, and so forth, right? So that's the first tier. If you don't even have the faculty to understand that you can't just go out and poke somebody's eye out because they said something that you don't like, right?
When you say you, are you talking about we the people? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct,
Because
yeah.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
so,
what I'm talking about.
so you're saying the people, the American population.
Correct.
All right.
So self-governance is not a simple just get in there and do it, because I mean everybody calls out for we want democracy, but you don't, because this is where the problem is, right? Democracy is mob rule, okay? And you don't ever want mob rule, because when you have mob rule, you have a mess, which is why, the founding father, as far as the wisdom of their forming it as a constitutional republic, so that we don't have mob rule, because mob rule means that you can marginalize minorities and it's okay, because that's what democracy is. And this is the lack of understanding of those principles. So because we are a constitutional republic, that means that and I hate the term constitutional rights, for instance, even though that's a summary or a simplification of what we have. We have rights. We have inalienable rights, right? That's what we have, okay? That's the premise from the Declaration of Independence. Inalienable rights, meaning that it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so because we have these rights...
Where's justice? Where's justice?
Justice is kind of part of it, but it isn't. And this is where it gets really interesting, and that's why we have some of the problems, because, again, lack of understanding of things.
Without justice, you can't have it. You can't have any of that without justice.
Sure.
And we don't have justice in this country. If you have money and you have access to resources, you can buy more justice than a poor, oppressed black person in East LA.
Yeah, and that can happen. But
that's part of why this experiment doesn't work, because there is no such thing as blind, equitable justice being meted out to every single United States citizen. I don't talk about the aliens because they shouldn't have rights. They're here illegally. But for a U.S. citizen to claim that every segment of the population across the entire country has access to equal justice, that's absolutely, it's not true. It just isn't.
Correct.
So without justice, how can you pursue life, liberty, and happiness?
Well, one can argue. Well, again, before we go there, one can even argue that we're not all created equal, which is true, right?
Good day, everybody, and welcome to another iteration of Inside Reality with Jimmy Tran to my right, perhaps to your left, depending on your perspective. I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. Please like, comment, share the show. We try to dissect topics of germane, engaging interest to each person, and we try to dissect these topics from an intellectual perspective, philosophical perspective, pragmatic perspective, but an honest perspective and a very sincere perspective. And I'm a reluctant Republican. I happen to think the entire Constitution is broken, doesn't worked for maybe a short period of time. Jimmy has an antithetical perspective of that. Today we're going to talk about the great experiment doesn't work. And I happen to be very cynical about it. And, I'm still blessed to be in the country called the United States. I think it was the fat guy with a cigar, Winston Churchill. He said, democracy is a bad form of government, but everything else is worse.
Yeah.
So I happen to, again, appreciate that, billions of people across the planet don't even have running water. And here I am with, a nice shirt, a microscope behind me in a nice suburban 3,000 double tier house, yet I'm still complaining about the government. So I have to be careful not to be too big a hypocrite. I'm blessed. But at the same time, I'm making a declaration, the great experiment called the United States and the U.S. Constitution, it does not work. What are your thoughts?
Anyway, well, for one, I'm more of an independent. I take issues along the way. I'm not party. I've tried thinking, okay, I can go with this. And just the party thing just never worked for me.
Well, that's my point. It doesn't work. The two-party
Yeah.
system doesn't work. That's the essence. That's the essence of the point we're making in the show today.
In
The great
part, I mean,
experiments doesn't
I think-
work, man. It's not
I think
working.
I think that two-party system is fine. I don't think that that's part of the. I mean, I don't think that that's the main issue. I mean, so let's break down for a moment what we're talking about in terms of this great experiment, right? I mean, the first thing is self-governance, right? So that's the first tier. That's the easiest tier when it comes to this great experiment. So I think that there's a few other tiers. Another tier that I would say is part of this great experiment is this idea that somehow people from various disparate background, because up until the U.S. formally formed, I mean, you can argue that the Roman Empire and then eventually the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire was kind of formulated in some ways like this too, where you have basically it's not an ethno-state, right? So you have these countries, but the Roman period was more through conquest, and so that's a very different. Whereas the United States was not formed through conquest per se. What I mean by that, it wasn't like there was a group of people and then they came in and you just kind of gobbled them up. I mean, yes, there were native individuals here, but they were not large. I mean, some people probably would fact check me and say, oh, okay, because all the Europeans came and killed off everybody. Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, there's different parts, and because the history of the United States, span a lot of different things. But the point is that there are a lot of different ethnic groups that have come together, and we're more an ideological framework, when it comes to governance. So that's another part of the experiment, I think. And then the third part of the experiment is the economic part of the experiment. So
I don't know what the hell you said. Are you basically saying then, I'm guessing, that we're so diverse anthropologically that it can't work because we don't have similar interests?
Well, that's
because
part of
what today's topic is about is the great experiment called the United States
Correct.
as a constitutional republic.
Yes,
as a constitutional republic. And I'm arguing that it does not work. It's not working at all. Clear. Yeah, there are parts of it that work, but overall, holistically, too many parts of our population are disenfranchised. Too many parts of our population aren't contributing to this thing called, the economic livelihood. It makes the framework work as well. Because remember, Jefferson wrote The Pursuit of Happiness.
Correct.
He didn't guarantee this Constitution that you would be happy. He basically is inferring, actually more than inferring, he's saying
explicitly,
one of the founders, you get off your fat ass and make a contribution to your happiness. It's not the government's job to supply you with food stamps and a house and a farm or whatever the hell you want. You've got to make that happen.
Yeah.
And that's the falsehood, that's the spurious, dangerous, I would even submit, possibly even it's not gonna say evil, but it's so dangerous, it's so false, it's based on a foundation of but anyway, I was making the obvious point that nobody talks about. Jefferson, who was one of the framers of the frickin', foundation of this country, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. 11 years later, the Constitutional Congress codified the Constitution. 10 years after that, we have the 10 amendments. But as one of the people that founded the country, Jefferson, and I would think most of his acolytes and the other framers recognized the population has to participate in their own destiny by getting off their butts and making things happen. Do you believe the framers thought the government today, 260 years later, whatever the hell it is, where you have 1 out of 8 Americans that are contingent on government for food, the food stamps? Do you think that's what they had in mind?
No.
The framers? Hell no.
No. I mean,
and that's one of the problems that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
Is the reliance on government has become too prodigious, too large, too almost enormous.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that has to do with, for me, when it comes to governance, the best model that I've ever seen, and to me, it's like God created humanity and the relationships we have with parents and children and all that as a way to give us a model of how governance and society work on different tiers and different levels. That's why I often talk about how in the very early stage of our life, we literally live in tyranny, not necessarily by choice. and we were there. I mean, when we're born, that's all we know, because we don't know know anything else, right?
Well, yeah, because
So
we don't have control, but
Exactly.
it's a benevolent.
Correct, but
It's
it's
a
still, but in terms of governance, it's still, so if you look at it, I mean, again, it's just a matter of models, right? And so a model is just expressing what it is, but because we don't have control of our faculties in any given way, I mean, even our ability to physiologically control ourselves, right? So at that stage, so when we take that same thing and we apply the level of maturity physiologically and mentally and emotionally and all that kind of stuff, right? You can see why certain type of governance fits better and works better in the real world, if you will, outside of the family and home and so forth. And so to me, that kind of thing is where it starts for us to kind of understand. So like what you're saying, I mean, people don't want to do anything. Well, guess what? Most children are kind of that way, right? And so when people behave like a child, they are, the system would have to then treat them like a child. I mean, and then that's where, even if they're a full-grown adult physiologically, but mentally, emotionally, intellectually, they've never really progressed beyond a certain point. And
How is that germane to our topic today? That the great experiment, the American form of government, the constitutional republic, based on Constitution, the amendments,
yeah,
the state, the municipal government. I mean, you can granulize it from federal to state
sure,
to municipal to
yeah,
all that stuff.
sure.
I just don't think it works at the federal level. I guess is what essentially is
That's
what I'm saying.
yeah,
The federal centralized form of government, it's not working, man.
yeah,
And
and
I'm arguing that it's not really the fault of the architecture itself or the machine called the constitutional. I'm arguing that it doesn't work because you have too much population, too much of the 330 million Americans plus the 20 million Americans, illegal aliens that Biden let in, the 200 and what is that, 350 million,
350-ish, yeah,
350 million Americans, more than half don't want to get off their ass and make a contribution to their own lives, let alone a greater cause called community or their neighborhoods or whatever you want to call it. And that's the problem. It's not so much the machine. It's, yes, the political people that are in the machine, yes, I can't stand any of them, period. But it's the people themselves that aren't making a contribution within the framework of the machine. That's why the great experiment, it doesn't work.
well, like I said,
And I don't think the founders thought that was going to happen. I could be wrong.
well,
I don't know.
like I said, here's where I look at it, right? First off, the experiment to me is the experiment of self-governance, right? So in order to self-govern, you got to have at least certain level of understanding, maturity, and so forth, right? So that's the first tier. If you don't even have the faculty to understand that you can't just go out and poke somebody's eye out because they said something that you don't like, right?
When you say you, are you talking about we the people? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct,
Because
yeah.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So you're saying the people, the
people,
American population.
Correct.
All right.
So self-governance is not a simple just get in there and do it, because I mean everybody calls out for, we want democracy, but you don't, because this is where the problem is, right? Democracy is mob rule, okay? And you don't ever want mob rule, because when you have mob rule, you have a mess, which is why, the founding father, as far as the wisdom of their forming it as a constitutional republic, so that we don't have mob rule, because mob rule means that you can marginalize minorities and it's okay, because that's what democracy is. And this is the lack of understanding of those principles. So because we are a constitutional republic, that means that and I hate the term constitutional rights, for instance, even though that's a summary or a simplification of what we have. We have rights. We have inalienable rights, right? That's what we have, okay? That's the premise from the Declaration of Independence. Inalienable rights, meaning that it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so because we have these rights,
where's justice? Where's justice?
Justice is kind of part of it, but it isn't. And this is where it gets really interesting, and that's why we have some of the problems, because again, lack of understanding of things.
Without
Because
justice, you can't have it. You can't have any of that without justice.
Sure.
And we don't have justice in this country. If
Well,
you have money and you have access to resources, you can buy more justice than a poor, oppressed black person in East LA.
Yeah, and that can happen. But
that's part of why this experiment doesn't work, because there is no such thing as blind, equitable justice being meted out to every single United States citizen. I don't talk about the aliens because they shouldn't have rights. They're here illegally. But for a U.S. citizen to claim that every segment of the population across the entire country has access to equal justice is absolutely, it's not true. It just isn't.
Yeah. Correct.
So without justice, how can you pursue life, liberty, and happiness?
Well,
how?
one can argue. Well, again, before we go there, one can even argue that we're not all created equal, which is true, right? Some are shorter, some are taller, some are stronger, some are bigger, and so forth, right? And some are faster, some are slower, some are smarter, and so forth. So even in that framework, I mean, I remember somebody pointed that out to me. It's like, okay, that was more of a John Locke kind of thing, right? Whereas, so this is where the fight, I think, happens in our society. The wrestling of it is that we have this feeling like we want this equality, but we can't really get it because we're really not equal, right? Because everybody is different. There's different economic.
Either that, or we don't want to recognize it, or we whine about it, or we don't want to overcome our shortcomings, no pun intended. We don't want to, because it's hard.
It is hard. Well, and that's the thing, right? And so the only thing that government can really provide on some level is equal protection, for instance. I understand that what you just said about the justice thing is a problem. And so leveling the playing field.
I don't think it executes that very well.
No.
The only thing government really should do, in my opinion, is keep us, relatively speaking, safe, whatever the hell that means.
Well, that's what.
Provide infrastructure. Yeah. Like roads and bridges and all that type of thing.
Well, that is arguable even that, right? But at the least, I mean, from a constitutional standpoint, right, the protection of the border is the primary, right?
And half the Democrats don't even believe in protecting the border
today. That wasn't the case.
Well, yeah.
20 years ago.
Living today. That's why the experiment doesn't work.
But 20 years ago, you hear them speak, and it's a whole different perspective. But that all aside, I mean, again, at the end of the day, you already pointed it out, we are selfish. And so we're selfish, we're going to do what is in our best interest. And actually, that's part of, to me, what the Constitution is intended for, right? Because we know that people are selfish. And so we have to not, because once we intervene, then we create a lot of different dynamics. So here's an example, right? So we have these thing called affirmative action, right? Because we have certain segments of society that were disadvantaged, right? At different tiers, okay? So things were put into place to make sure that those individuals got access. So I think that the number, when that all started, more men were getting educated in the higher education, right? In the colleges and universities and so forth. And so there are more men than women. Well, through affirmative action and things like that number have shifted. Now, I think, if I remember, I was reading something about this, we are now inverted, where there are more women in the university than there are men. So does that mean that, what does that mean then? That means that we allow for those actions, for those adjustments to go beyond because the idea is, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like we don't want anybody to get hurt. We don't want anybody to die, right? I mean,
that's not true. The people that run the country, political fat donut eaters, they do want to bring pain to people that oppose their power. What are you talking about?
No, I'm not talking about that.
When you say people don't want people to be hurt, who the hell are you talking about?
Okay, let me try to rephrase.
The only people that don't want people to be hurt are people that are enlightened, people that have a sense of ethics and morals.
Yeah.
Those persons maybe absolutely are at a place where they see a universal view where they want to live peaceful, to celebrate excellence, and to engage in enlightenment, and to not harm other folks for the most part. The Republicans, the Democrats, at the state, at the federal level, are you telling me these people really care about holistic people overall? Are you serious?
Well, I think that there's a
No
certain care. I
way.
mean,
No
people.
way.
I tend to give people more of the benefit of the
So
doubt.
you're saying
okay?
Nancy Pelosi really cares
At
in
one
her
point
heart,
she
in
did.
her soul, in her spirit. She cares about even Republicans who oppose her?
At one point, I'm sure she did.
Really?
Whether she did,
Wow.
sure. Again, I give
So
people
what
a little
happened?
bit of.
Pritzker, the fat guy from the governor of
There's-
Illinois, do you really think he cares in his heart about Republicans who oppose him? Do you really believe that?
Well, I think that people have a certain genuineness.
I
to
don't
them,
even think
you know.
Donald Trump really cares about the people that oppose him. He's basically said out loud he doesn't. So all I'm saying is the people that really have power in our country are always, for the most part, they're interested in what self-aggrandizes their sustaining power.
Sure. That's
Of-
why
and
that
attention.
axiom. Well, that's why that axiom of power is true, right? Lord Acton's axiom.
Absolute power corrupts.
Absolute power is corrupt.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to me, that's really one of the biggest contributing factors. And it's more than, to me, just the individual that is corrupted. I think that the power of the system can get corrupted too when that happens. And so that's what we're seeing.
Obviously. Look at the shutdown of the government right now. You know, I don't know when this podcast will air. Maybe it'll be around Zeta Reticuli in a million years by the time these radio waves get there. But at this particular time, as I'm articulating this, the government is shut down. And both, do you think the Senate, any senators really care one way or the other? You know, they go on.
Yeah.
Their little
Well,
microphones, and they'll say, I care. But
Well-
you know what they all do? They go home to their mansions and they have Vichy Soir and, oysters Rockefeller and
Yeah.
fine Argentinian wine. And they don't even think about their constituents.
Yeah.
Do you
No,
really think they care? You really do? Is that naive?
Well, here's the thing, right? I mean, to your point.
On
and
either
like,
on either
I'm
side.
gonna give you evidence to prove your point, right? And that is, if they did care about this, they would have already weeks ago, right? Say, okay, look, we're not going to take a dime, because if our constituents are not getting paid, right, we're not going to get paid either. The fact that they just came to that realization, and I'm glad they have come to that realization that they should,
Absolutely.
4 weeks or 3 weeks in before they made that realization. So that they should do that. Again, I'm not going to say every one of them are in this way. Maybe there are a few that haven't. And so
Name one. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't really
well,
think the
I know
average
one.
person
Well, I do know one
in
I mean,
America.
I know Donald Trump, but he's not a senator or congressman. But he's, like, I don't take a paycheck. I'm doing this because I want to help. You know.
But he doesn't need to make a paycheck because
It doesn't
he's a
matter.
multi-billionaire.
But it doesn't
It
matter.
does
but-
matter, man.
No, it doesn't. Because
these people are protected from their own policies that we the people have to live with.
I get.
I'm
And
on
that's
the
part of the
margin
grand
upper
experiment.
middle class. I'm part of upper middle class at the threshold of that. So I'm a blessed guy, man.
Yeah.
Believe me, I got running water. I've got
Yeah.
a 2-car garage. I got whatever. I can't complain at all. All I'm doing
Yeah.
is observing what I see.
Yeah. Agreed.
Realistically,
Yeah.
pragmatically, sincerely, objectively, and I would even say with some level of courage, because most people don't say this stuff out loud,
Yeah.
man. They just don't. Particularly the fat donut-eating governors and senators and Congress people on the right and the left. All they do is they vote for policies that protect their little circles of power. Look what's happening with a government shutdown, right?
Yeah.
There's only 3 Democrats, senators, because you have to have 60 votes, right,
60
to
votes, yeah. To reopen, yeah.
resurrect the government. So all the other senators, 47, I guess, is that right?
Yeah.
Democrats have continued to vote down, what's it called, the
The
CR?
continuing resolution. Yeah.
And again, people use these stupid words, these articulate the vernacular, the the nomenclature, and the average. Do you think the average American? Let me ask you this: of the 350 million Americans, including the 20 million illegals that Biden let in, of the 350 million Americans, if you put a microphone in front of every single one of those 350, including the 20 million illegals here, and ask them, what is a continuing resolution need? How many of that population? Take a guess. Take a guess.
Probably
what
pretty
percentage?
low. I mean, most people don't.
What percentage? Well, say it.
I don't know.
What do you think the percentage?
I mean, it's just pulling out.
I'd say 10%. I'd say 10%.
It's a low, yeah.
That's the problem. That's why the great experiment has failed, because we, the people, aren't even aware of how our own government works.
Yeah.
So how can you keep people accountable when you don't even know how the machine works? And that's what all the fat donut eating political people of power recognize.
Yeah.
They recognize that obvious thing. The people I'm talking to don't even know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah, that's part of it, because again, every institution, every thing has some kind of jargon with it, right? And so continuing resolution and all these things are all just the jargon of that area.
Right.
You know, just like medical, you don't expect people to know anything. And that's actually how you create these things called a moat, right? In business, we call it creating the moat, right? When you create a moat, you prevent,
manipulation, or to manipulate
people from outside to come in.
You're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we see that too, because our medical system have failed us. I mean, in so many different ways, because we allow for instance, for the big pharma, to dictate and drive a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, without the type of balanced accountability and so forth. So again, when you have the watchdogs, right? When you have the people that are hired, the regulators, okay? Think about that for a moment. The way that our system is set up, and this is again part of contributing to the failure and how it's fallen apart. I mean, literally, we have regulators that are supposed to be there to make sure that the little groups, different organizations, different companies, and everything are not violating laws and so forth, right? And so nobody likes regulators.
Ombudsman, I think it's called. That's part of the nomenclature. Ombudsman. That's part of their job.
But an ombudsman, I think, is somebody that it's a person that you can complain to get certain issue.
Yeah, but
resolved.
they're essentially helping out, being a watchdog. Anyway, go ahead. Continue your point.
My point on bringing that up is that we have literally a fox guarding the hen house type of scenario, basically, right? Because you've got this revolving door where you got a guy that is the top executive or whatever in the one company, and then they leave that company and then they get a job as a regulator on the other side, and then they're still friends and buddies with the people. And so you got to,
How does that relate to the great experiment called our government not working?
Well, part of that is the corruption that builds up from it, because now you have government, let's say on the other side, you have government official, right? Who then, when they retire from that government position, then they get to go into private, and then they get this cushy job because
so they're perpetuating their power. But you're actually making a cogent point, and you're reinforcing my overall point. Thank you very much. I'm gonna give you a B+ on that, because you're arguing that the machine is corrupt because the people that populate operating the levers become corrupt. I get
correct.
that.
Yeah.
But my cogent point is the bottom part of the machine is we the people.
Sure.
And even your argument about how the health system is broken, which it is, but it's the people themselves that don't take and manage their own health.
Yeah.
Fat, obese society, we're over medicated. So once again, I always come back to we the people have failed ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's why the great experiment does not work, will not work, because it's too hard. Damn dogs are here. It's too hard for we the people to participate as citizens in the framework of a constitutional republic, because we're supposed to be accountable, self-reliant, resourceful, and to sacrifice, to pursue the American dream.
Yeah.
So I should drop my microphone on. I should drop the microphone, end all podcast. There's your answer. Thank you very much. Give me an A+ for that. See you later.
Well, like I said, in part, because to me, like I said,
let me ask you this real quick. Do you ever hear a fat donut eating politician say what that point was that I just made? forget about me, but saying that we the people fail ourselves. Have you ever heard anybody in power say that out?
No, not usually.
Absolutely
I can't
not.
recall
And you
anybody,
agree that that's such a part of the equation to make the experiment work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How come nobody says that then?
Remember,
Is it just too hard to say that we the people have failed ourselves? Is it just too hard to say?
Probably. I mean, it's not easy to call ourselves hypocrites, right? I mean, we've already established that, several podcasts ago. I mean, that's one of the reasons why this podcast, as we do it, is such a unique approach, because we're trying to be, transparent and truthful.
And we just try to
it,
observe and call out what we see.
Yeah. So
that's all.
The other side of it, to me, like I said, there's multiple tiers of this experiment. What you're talking about is self-governance, which is one tier, and that's a big tier. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, another tier of this experiment to me has to do with the fact that we are unifying people, or at least we're attempting to unify people through more of an ideological framework rather than an ethnic anthropological framework. Okay? So what I mean by that is that if we look at history, we see that various groups of people have formed, and they basically form boundaries and so forth because they were ethnically established. Now that that ethnic has varying degrees, but and some of that has to do with the fact that the evolution of people and groups have evolved from tribes, right? So you have this tribe, and then they have children and so forth, and then so now you have a large number of people that make up this population base, and then in order for them to protect themselves, they boundaries, or they settle in areas that have natural boundaries like rivers and mountains and so forth, so that they can maintain and survive. I mean, again, I'm not.
How does that relate to the great experiment not working?
Because in the case of the United States, we have, you mentioned it before, the fact that our diversity is our greatest, weakness, not the greatest.
I say it's one of the weaknesses. I didn't say it was the greatest weakness.
Okay, fine.
The greatest weakness is that we the people don't want to take on. We don't want to sacrifice and pursue self-reliance and pursue happiness.
Okay, fine.
We don't want to. Okay. And number two, we don't want to hold those accountable who have power.
Sure.
Those are the problems.
Yeah.
And the third problem, you're right. We're too diverse. We're too.
Yeah.
So we don't have common shared interests.
Correct. At least not at the national level. And this is where it gets.
That's what we're talking about. The federal experiment doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's why I'm keeping you accountable in the podcast. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And you try to keep me accountable.
Well,
but I'm better at keeping you accountable. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That's soda water.
This is why
soda water.
This is why I want to point out the distinction, because it's really important. Because the federal level is supposed to be. We're supposed to be. Okay. This is where the biggest lie, if you will, or the biggest communication or whatever, right?
We about 9 minutes.
We are 50 independent countries that have come under a unified agreement to allow the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, to be the governing bylaws, if you will, right? I mean, because the whole thing is more of a transaction base. It is nothing more than that. Right? We made a transaction, or our predecessors did, right? Made a transaction in New Mexico. It was 1912 when we made that compact saying that we want to join this union. So by joining this union, we allow the U.S. Constitution to be that governing bylaws that will govern.
Well, New Mexico is a very different story, because we were a kingdom, a territory.
Yeah, no, I get all that.
And New Mexico wanted to be a state before 1912, but
sure.
The fact is, the powers that be in Washington, D.C. saw New Mexico as having too many Mexicans, too many dark people,
sure.
and didn't even want to. So nobody talks about that either. We're going off on a tangent, but I wanted to make a correction.
That's true.
That's why I've got a microscope here to talk granularly about some of these generic statements that are made.
Yeah. No, and that's true in several other states. I mean, New Mexico was definitely unique in that regard. I think in Hawaii, there was also that as part of an issue, too.
I don't think it was a territory, though. New Mexico's, I think, the only state that was a kingdom, a territory, and became a state.
No,
anyway.
was
Anyway, let's get back to
Hawaii-
your point about
anyway.
the great experiment not working.
So
Because you only have 8, 9,
okay, so to me that's one tier why the problem we deal with is because when you're dealing with multiple ethnic, I mean, it's just a perfect example. It's like, what should we grow, right? I mean, if you're Asian, I mean, rice is the primary thing. But if you're European, is more corn, maybe not corn, but wheat is the thing. Asians don't really drink milk. That's not the common food, ingredient in Asian cuisine. There's hardly any other than butter here and there.
We're making a point that because of our anthropological differences and the eclecticness, we don't even agree on diet.
Correct. I mean, that's just one basic example
Absolutely.
of the divisions if we have in
Yes.
part. But like I said, doesn't mean that we couldn't make it work if we wanted to, which is again why we have the way that we have our structure, our government is structured. But because if we don't educate the people, okay, especially when since the 1970s, we've imported 350 million people. Okay, half of those people came more than half of these people came over from outside of the United States. Okay, so that's what roughly 40 to 50 years. 40 to 50 years is not really truly enough time because there's not enough generational turnover for the assimilation of the ideological ideals.
But you're assuming that people want to be assimilated.
That's another.
And I argue that they don't. They don't want to give up what they brought in. They don't want to give up their own cultural, anthropological traditions and mores and values. And I get it. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying the great experiment doesn't work you just mentioned another reason.
Yeah.
Because populations don't want to assimilate. Yeah. Look how many Mexican flags you see at parades now. And again, I don't care. I'm just observing it. Where's the American flag? Because they don't want to Americanize themselves, whatever the hell that means to even be Americanized. Which I argued in other shows. I don't even know what the hell it is to be an American anymore. Part of it used to be owning land and working the land, but people don't do that. It doesn't happen. Only happens in Montana, Iowa, South Dakota, I mean, certain agrarian states. It doesn't happen in densely populated vertical cities. Yeah. People don't want to own land, let alone farm the land, work the land. Not going to happen. So the whole thing doesn't work. You've just made my point once again. The great experiment does not work. It will not work. Thank you very much. It's been a good podcast. You got 2 minutes.
I mean, these are. I mean, what really, to me, these areas that we presenting, that is actually some of the weaknesses that we either have to resolve for it to work. We have to find solutions for them. Otherwise, for instance, here's an example, right? I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago in New York, right? New York is about to elect a mayor who is very openly communist socialist, right? I mean, that's his position. Okay? Yes. And he has already, and the fact that he has a lot of momentum going into this. I mean, what's really interesting is that in contrast to him, Andrew Cuomo to me is not really a real contender. Okay, I mean,
what's your point? What's your point? Get to your point.
Okay, Siwa, the third party, I guess the Republican guy, right?
Yeah, the guy with the beret.
Yeah. Okay, he and his crew, I forget the name of the group, but they single-handedly dealt with some of the most violent period in New York history, meaning that if anybody was a hero, you would say he's one of those people, right? He saw how people were so afraid of getting on subways and all that kind of stuff because, they were being attacked.
Get your point. Got 2 minutes.
So he's running to be mayor. And the fact that people rather have somebody that will give them free stuff than somebody that really have been fully engaged in the community for the last however many decades, finding solutions to bring safety, security, and protection for the people. Right?
You just made my point. We're done, okay? Here's the point. You just made it again. Thank you. No, I mean this. I mean it respectfully. The better question is the socialist communist in the largest city in our country, the financial capital of the world, is going to be a open, overt communist socialist, basically a communist more than even a socialist, because he wants to redistribute wealth, centralize even food supply, because that's one of the essences of and the differences between communism and socialism. which most of these people don't even recognize, is communism distributes and controls food.
Yeah.
He wants to do that. So the better question is,
production. That's it. I mean, they control.
the better question is, whatever I can't even say the guy's name. He's going to be elected mayor, the communist.
Mandambi.
The better question is why? And you just answered it. It's because it's free, or in the mind of the voter, free.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's the most spurious, false premise there is, because it's not free.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that sense of freedom that these people are going to vote for is going to cannibalize themselves, and they're going to have chaos and entropy.
And that's
another reason why the experiment is over, because younger people, as polls have done, want to move towards socialism.
Yeah.
And that's the entropy, that's the chaos that will cannibalize our country. That's why the great experiment didn't work. I had a great ride. I grew up with Clint Eastwood, Charlton Heston, and Burt Lancaster. Thank God. Thank you very much. The great experiment doesn't work. Brought to you by Inside Reality. And once again, to be clear, we appreciate living in this great country, right? Both of us. We do not endorse violence or any insurrection at all. We're simply observing what we see. And we're asking people to think about it more and to openly discuss it with as little bias as possible.
Well, that raises another question, really, is
yeah, but we've concluded the show.
I know we can't, I mean, our time is up, but it is one of the things that I think is important for us to at least put it out there, is like, okay, well, if this experiment doesn't work, I mean, we're kind of screwed, because all the other places, as Churchill has already said, is worse. So I think
I just think that perhaps just socialism is inevitable. I kind of just think it's moving out.
We've had that. 20th century is littered with that experiment. We're seeing that played out right now in South America. And everybody says, "Oh, that's not the real version." Okay, well, give me a version that worked. And then they'll point to things like what do you call it? The Scandinavian countries. Well, you're dealing with 5 to 10 million people.
Thank you again for the constitutional republic that we've enjoyed. All right, everybody, have a great day.
I think
we gotta go, man. We gotta go.
Last thought here is that, to me, I think that what we're experiencing is really proof that the experiment is working, because the system is. The experiment has to adjust and has to correct itself, and to me, that's one of the machine
doesn't correct itself. It's we the people have to correct.
No, that's what I'm saying. We the people have to correct it.
You're wrong. You're wrong. Good night. Good night.
All right.
Bye.
All right. We'll talk
absolutely
next time.
wrong.